Today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. In my Le'Veon Bell video, I spoke about how football players' legacies and the way they're perceived constantly changes throughout their career. It's almost never actually set in stone. They instead swing up and down season to season and sometimes game to game like the damn stock market. Well, throughout DeAngelo Hall's career, his stock leveled out over time after an early rise to prominence. And he honestly held pretty steady for a long time until this happened. This one play in practice changed the way people look at dude. And I can't lie, man, after 14 years in the league, to be judged off this one moment is pretty damn tough. But that's the game. DeAngelo Hall used the chip on his shoulder to overcome his 5'10" stature. His hyper-aggressive style of play became a great weapon, a psychological sword that DeAngelo once wielded with supreme skill. But Father Time comes for us all, and every great warrior reaches a point in their lives when it's finally time to put the sword down and walk away. Despite that fact, we've seen war-torn sports heroes on numerous occasions seek to defy the inevitable, as they stubbornly pick up the old sword and shield and charge out onto the battlefield for one final hurrah, only to be easily dealt with by a younger, hungrier player looking to earn stripes off whatever's left of the old veteran. And to be completely fair to quote-unquote warriors like DeAngelo, those of us who didn't use that blade to forge our own greatness could never truly fathom how difficult it must be to walk away. Be that as it may, we see it time and time again. Live by the metaphorical sword, die by the metaphorical sword. You have to adapt. But if you're unable to do that, one day you'll discover that your great weapon of triumph actually has two equally sharp edges. Bro, his confidence, aggressive nature, trash talk, and refusal to back down from anybody made him a first-round pick, a 3-time Pro Bowler, and a holder of multiple NFL records. But at the same time, his overconfidence, over-aggressive nature, and unsolicited trash talk and refusal to back down from anyone once he got a bit older also put a target on his back and led to what's probably his most memorable moment for a lot of NFL fans. I personally think this is kind of criminal because while I wouldn't say DeAngelo Hall was ever the best corner in the league, he was definitely one of the better corners during his prime and one of my personal favorite corners to watch, especially when he was matching up against a top tier wide receiver. But anytime I bring him up in an argument, all people ever point to is this moment. Now later in the video, we're going to get into what may have led to this moment. And respectfully, because again, I'm a big fan of DeAngelo, he probably had this coming and you'll see what I mean later in the video. But before we talk about that DeAngelo Hall, what we not gonna do is forget about this DeAngelo Hall. Cue to show him some love music. During his 14 seasons in the NFL, DeAngelo Hall had many moments of brilliance. Dude would play press man coverage with some of the game's best, and his competitive spirit always made those matchups so fun to watch. Dude once picked off 4 passes in a single game, and is tied for the most fumble return yards in NFL history. His brash nature and unflappable confidence may have actually been a bit of a necessity, especially once you consider the fact that he played in an era of dominant, beastly wide receivers who would toast defenders and then let everybody know about it. DeAngelo Hall came up battling these dudes, a lot of the time in single coverage. And in a time where you had to compete not only physically, but mentally and verbally as well, DeAngelo held his own in all 3 aspects for over a decade, in the toughest league on the damn planet, from his high school and college dominance to his NFL rise and fall. Today we discuss what happened to DeAngelo Hall. Accidental rhyme, but y'all know what time it is, bros. Cue the Wayne.
Yeah, you'll never know quitter, 'cause I'ma go get it.
It's a new year and that means it's time for a new you. So maintain your momentum this year by feeling your best, and we all know that starts with looking your best. Football players know this one: look good, you play good. That's why Manscaped is hooking you up with the best tools and formulations that are specifically designed for men. And it's a lot to like over at manscaped.com, including the Performance Package 4.0. That's your all-in-one, head-to-toe men's grooming and hygiene kit. Now check it out. Some of y'all already know about the Lawnmower 4.0. And to be real, this thing is good enough to be used as a beard trimmer, assuming you got a brand new one fresh out the box. but it's specifically designed with the skin safe tech so that you can use it on the most sensitive parts of your body. Pretty sure y'all feel what I'm saying. Now it's waterproof and it's got this built-in LED light for better precision. I say it all the time, but this thing is perfect for use in the shower. Now they also have the Weed Whacker. Now this is a nose and ear hair trimmer, and it's actually got the same skin safe tech as the Lawnmower 4.0. Now the Performance Package 4.0 kit also comes with your crop reviver and crop preserver. These are just basically toner and deodorant to keep you fresh throughout the day. So when you choose the Performance Package 4.0 kit, you get the best bang for your buck. Also, you can enroll in the Peak Hygiene plan and get ongoing replenishments of your favorite products delivered straight to your door. Plus, for a limited time only, you get 2 free gifts, one of which you can see right here. This is the Shed Travel Bag. So you get that, and you also get the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxer Briefs as well. So start your year off right and go to manscaped.com for 20% off, plus free international shipping, plus the 2 free gifts when you use promo code FlemLo20 at checkout. Again, that's manscaped.com/FlemLo20, or you can just click the link in the description and use code FlemLo20 at checkout. Shout out to Manscaped once again for sponsoring the video. Without further ado, let's get it. Now you might have a hard time recognizing this kid as future Pro Bowl cornerback DeAngelo Hall, but his older brother Kevin helped transform a quiet video game loving kid into a beast of an athlete. But Kevin was sadly shot multiple times on the street when DeAngelo was still just a kid. Still, the lessons that he taught didn't go unheeded, as a young DeAngelo would keep going, eventually finding more heroes to look up to. DeAngelo Hall grew up in the Chesapeake, Virginia area at a time when lots of players from there were blossoming into stars and some even icons. Legends like Allen Iverson and Michael Vick gave Virginia kids like DeAngelo a sort of North Star to follow. We're talking about DeAngelo being a kid and seeing superstars blossom from 30 minutes down the street, you know? If they can do it, so could DeAngelo. Now, based on his own words, DeAngelo Hall wasn't a great high school player. He said that despite playing both sides of the ball and posting 1,300 yards as a senior running back, not to mention scoring 30 touchdowns, all while averaging 10 yards per carry, that he didn't feel he was a great player. On defense, the future NFL corner had 7 picks as a junior and 9 picks as a senior. His senior year, he also recorded over 100 tackles and helped lead his team to the state title game. Dude was named Player of the Year by multiple publications and ranked as the #2 best player in the state of Virginia. So when he says he was a good high school player but not a great one, I have to assume he's comparing himself to those icons that he watched growing up. Because by damn near anybody's standards, dude was a great high school player. I don't know what he's talking about. And I do want to say, in researching this video, I found some things in DeAngelo's character that I think would catch a lot of people off guard. And one of those things, and y'all gonna look at me crazy when I say this, humility. Now, it's gonna sound crazy to some of y'all using a word like humility to describe a guy who was once nicknamed Me-Angelo for his quote-unquote selfish play. And while Me-Angelo does show up throughout his career, I kind of found it refreshing that on more than one occasion when it comes to assessing his own play, unlike some cats who blame everybody else for their shortcomings, DeAngelo never really shied away from taking accountability onto himself. Like, he was tougher on himself than pretty much anybody else. He actually called himself out multiple times during his career, even saying after a bad string of games in 2011, the way I'm playing right now, they need to cut me because I'm definitely not worth what I'm getting. Fun fact, the very next game after he made that statement, dude went off and won Defensive Player of the Week, giving some credence to the old Einstein quote that goes, "Success comes from curiosity, concentration, perseverance, and self-criticism." You got to be able to look in the mirror and pick out your flaws. That's the only way you're going to improve, man. As a shorter player early on, DeAngelo developed a trademark chip on his shoulder. The same chip that would one day write a couple checks that his game could no longer cash was actually the only reason there was ever any money in the bank to begin with. Dude developed the necessary psychology to play the position at a high level. That, along with his track speed, would serve him well. He accepted a scholarship offer to Virginia Tech and quickly impressed his college teammates and coaches in the preseason strength and conditioning test. Dude ran a 4.37 as a 17-year-old freshman and bench pressed 300 pounds. For a scrawny freshman cornerback, that's extremely impressive. And I know the 4.37 is hand timed or whatever, but I don't care, bro. Dude is fast. He eventually parlayed that athletic ability into a starting role as a true freshman, even intercepting a pass in his very first college game. By the time he was done at Virginia Tech, DeAngelo had put together a Hall of Fame career at the school, and he would officially be inducted years later. He was almost more of a weapon than a traditional corner, playing and making plays in all three phases of the game. In 3 seasons, dude recorded 190 tackles, caught 8 picks, had 2 forced fumbles, scored 5 punt return touchdowns, recorded the 3rd most punt return yards ever in the Big East, plus he scored both a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown on offense. Meaning dude actually scored a touchdown on defense, offense, and special teams, so if he was on the field, he was a threat to get in the end zone at any time. By the time he was 20 years old, the NFL had come calling. DeAngelo once again proved the legitimacy of his speed by running a 40-yard dash in 4.34 seconds, and now it was on official time. In 2004, the Atlanta Falcons, who already had one Virginia Tech star, decided to grab another one, this time for the other side of the ball. They took DeAngelo Hall with the 8th overall pick in 2004, and he quickly paid him back by becoming the youngest player ever to return an interception for a touchdown, only about a month after he turned 21. Bro, dude ended up making his first Pro Bowl in year 2 of his career, not wasting any time acclimating to the NFL. And by the time he was 22 years old, dude was matching up one-on-one with cats like Tio, Steve Smith, Reggie White, and Donald Driver. And some of y'all sleeping on Donald Driver, but that's okay. I'm gonna get to that video eventually, because I gotta learn you. Dude was a beast. Back to the story. Now look, ain't no corner really about to walk into the matchups and just walk out unscathed. But DeAngelo played well enough to come away with 10 pass deflections, 6 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery in year 2. And like I said before, he ended up making it into the Pro Bowl, a place that always seemed to just bring out the best in DeAngelo. Which does kind of make you wonder, had he been a part of more competitive teams throughout his career, what would that version of DeAngelo Hall have looked like? You know what I'm saying? It's a mystery. The following year, DeAngelo carried all that momentum from the previous Pro Bowl into the season. But before too long, he'd lose pretty much all of it. Man went off in the first 5 weeks of the season, catching 4 picks in 5 games. All in a defense that only allowed 1 defensive touchdown throughout that entire span. But, and here comes the negative, after that hot start, DeAngelo went cold. And with creating turnovers being such a huge part of his game, once those kind of slowed down, dude really began to gamble more and more, which would lead to big plays for opposing offenses. But despite that, he still made his 2nd Pro Bowl this year, and it kind of reminds you of the season Trevon Diggs just had. I'm forcing the most turnovers, but I'm also giving up the most yardage. And that's not like a knock at either player, but would I really be doing my job if I didn't at least draw that parallel for y'all? Like, come on, bro, I gotta point that out, right? DeAngelo was a big hit with fans, as dude had developed rivalries with pretty much any big name wide receiver he faced. But 2 of the more notable were Tio and Chad Johnson. Now the rivalry with Chad was a bit more friendly, trash talk and showmanship, as y'all know how extra this man could be at times, but it always felt like friendly competition because it's pretty much impossible to dislike Chad, like come on. But the one with Tio, that one seemed a little bit more intense. These dudes had a real disdain for each other, and they used to really battle it out on the field. But despite that, these two have really patched things up post-football, and unlike some of these cats to be holding sports grudges from 30 years ago, like bro, you just stressing yourself out for nothing, like nobody cares, let that shit go. These two have done the mature thing. They've moved on from that now. When the disdain they felt for each other, they realized, look, that's just us being competitive. That's over with. Now we can respect one another and we can be cool. And that's pretty much where they at. I think that's dope. In 2004, when DeAngelo was drafted, the Falcons felt he could be the cornerstone to their defense the same way Michael Vick was the cornerstone for their offense. But only 4 years later, both of the Virginia Tech stars have fallen out of grace with the team. DeAngelo was vilified in the media for showing support for Michael Vick, which I do feel is unfair, and hear me out. He didn't come out in support of what Vic did, but he also didn't throw him under the bus and was basically just showing Mike that he still had love on the team. Something that I'm sure Vic appreciated during that crazy time. Like, how many of y'all are prepared to publicly bash a guy who's not only your teammate and friend, but a cat who literally inspired you to get to where you are? A guy from the same area who you've idolized for most of your life. Everybody from street dudes to police officers generally protect their own, at least publicly. So when athletes do it, to me, pretty much just seems normal. Following the Michael Vick controversy, the Falcons ended up trading DeAngelo to the Raiders for a second and a fifth round pick. And we all know how much the late, great Al Davis loved speed and attitude, so DeAngelo seemed like a perfect fit. So perfect, in fact, that the Raiders decided to sign the 24-year-old corner to a 7-year, $72 million contract. You're talking basically $10 million a year, and this was 15 years ago, okay? That was big money. In his first 8 games with the Raiders, DeAngelo Hall caught 3 picks, made 13 pass deflections, 48 tackles, forced a fumble, and recorded a sack. Then immediately following those 8 games, he got cut. Yeah, bet you didn't see that shit coming. So DeAngelo Hall signed on to play 112 regular season games with the Oakland Raiders. But only 8 games into that, after a 2-6 start, the Raiders approached their new cornerback that they just signed and they asked him, you know what they asked him? They wanted him to take a pay cut. Like, damn, I just started this deal 2 months ago and you want me to restructure? Nah, I'm not doing that. Now, DeAngelo's box score stats that I read off earlier were pretty damn solid, but apparently his aggressive style was constantly leaving him exposed and he was just giving up too many big plays. According to one article, DeAngelo started the year off struggling to adapt to the Raiders system, but had seemed to be getting the hang of things in recent weeks. Despite that, the Raiders felt like they'd seen enough, and with his refusal to restructure the contract that they just gave him, they decide to release their 24-year-old star. See, DeAngelo was supposed to form a deadly duo with Nnamdi Asomugha, another forgotten player who I've covered in one of these videos a few years ago now. But when the duo didn't mesh right away, the Raiders hit the panic button and they pulled the plug. Of the $72 million that DeAngelo was supposed to get, he ended up walking away from that situation with only $8 million. Multiple Raiders players spoke out against the hasty move. Both Nnamdi Asomugha and safety Jabril Wilson voiced their displeasure with the team cutting DeAngelo, a guy who Jabril referred to as one of the best players on the team. My thing with this whole situation is you knew his pros and cons as a player when you signed him. So to give up on that whole thing just because bad DeAngelo had showed his face a little bit in those first 8 games, yeah, I can't really rock with that one. Regardless, the 24-year-old 2-time Pro Bowler rebounded like Dennis Rodman with a hangover. He ended up signing with Washington, where he played out the rest of the season, and in only 4 starts, dude actually caught himself another 2 interceptions and got 8 more pass deflections, making his 2008 season totals look pretty damn good, at least from a statistical standpoint. But after that season ended, DeAngelo made what he calls the biggest mistake of his career. So following the 2008 season, DeAngelo was a free agent and his 2 primary choices was to return back to Washington, where he'd fit in really good really quickly, or go to New England to play for Bill Belichick. And ultimately, like these things oftentimes do, it just came down to money. The 6-year, $55 million contract Washington offered was just too damn good of a deal to turn down, as it was pretty clear that DeAngelo was trying to make up for as much of the lost Oakland contract as he could. Understandably so. Like, when you sign a deal for $72 million, you count that $72 million like you have it. Even though we know how football contracts work, like, you probably shouldn't do that. But when you sign for $72 million and you walk away with $8 million, my next contract, bro, I'm trying to make up that difference. Like, I just am. But when it was all said and done and he looked back on that situation, he kind of felt a little bit different about it. Here's a quote. At that time, players didn't take short-term deals. But Randy Moss had just signed a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Patriots. I couldn't believe it. In my own contract discussion with the Pats, I recall Bill Belichick telling me they couldn't give me the contract Moss signed. Being a young and greedy knucklehead, I chose to stay in Washington on a long-term deal. 6 years, $54 million, which ultimately had me making the same per year salary as Moss. Bro, over a few million. I could have changed my legacy by being a part of that dynasty. That was on the table for me. And I wish I would have made the decision to take less money and play for Belichick. I feel him on that, and I like when guys care about their legacy. I know some people frown on that, but for me, it's like it's the only thing that's gonna remain after you're done. Your legacy, that's everything. Of course, with that said, there's no guarantees that signing with the Patriots would have won him a Super Bowl. Because you got to remember, he had the opportunity to sign with the Patriots following the 2008 season. And the Patriots didn't end up winning another Super Bowl until 2015. We're talking 7 whole seasons later. So by then, the 24-year-old DeAngelo would have been 31 years old. So the chances that he would even still be on the team are actually pretty slim. Just considering the fact that he was getting up there in age, and he actually had a really bad injury and ACL tear in 2014. And we all know how Belichick moved, man. He'll cut or trade your ass in a heartbeat. Still, at the same time, it's kind of fun to think, what would have happened if DeAngelo Hall was on the field for this play in Super Bowl 46, a game that was played in 2012, a season where DeAngelo was actually pretty damn good for Washington and may have been able to make the 1 or 2 big plays the Patriots needed to get over the hump in that game. But unfortunately, we'll never know. Moving on. Hypotheticals aside, DeAngelo played the rest of his career in Washington, basically playing 10 years there, a whole second career after the first one in Atlanta. During that time, he made another Pro Bowl in 2010, and remember how I said being around all those great players always seemed to bring out the best in dude? After all the time passed, that still had not changed, which DeAngelo proved by winning Pro Bowl MVP that year. Actually, earlier in that same season, dude tied an NFL record when he picked off Jay Cutler 4 times in the same game, one of which he took 92 yards the other way for the touchdown. Dude even joked when he retired that if he had played Jay Cutler a little bit more, he'd probably be a Hall of Famer. And even the biggest smoking Jay Cutler fan out there can admit, that's pretty damn hilarious, bro. So from 2004 to 2013, DeAngelo Hall was one of the better corners in the league. You could count on dude to play aggressive, and you can go ahead and pencil him in for multiple picks every season. But in 2014, everything changed, and you're about to see how this legacy-altering play could have actually been avoided. So DeAngelo Hall only played in 3 games in 2014 due to the fact that he tore his ACL in week 3. But one of the games that he did play in was this one, a loss to the Houston Texans, and cornerbacks knew it was going to be a long day when Andre Johnson came to town. Some longer than others, but I digress. And don't worry kids, Cortland Finnegan asked for this. But that Texans team was a little bit different than Texans of the years prior, because now, in addition to Andre, they also had Deandre Hopkins, a young pup in week 1 of only his 2nd NFL season. Somebody that DeAngelo may have described as still wet behind the ears. And look man, the wily vet was determined to establish his dominance with the young receiver. And it's funny because DeAndre did have some moments in this game where his youth really showed. Old heads at the time like Ryan Clark was coming down, forcing him to drop passes, and DeAngelo was in his face every damn play. They was on him. At one point, DeAngelo grabs just little baby D-Hop, man, by the helmet and tosses him after he had already made the tackle on the man. Was it unnecessary? Yes. Was it entertaining? Yeah, like he really tried to bully dude in that game. But despite all of that, D-Hop actually still had a really solid outing. He complimented Andre Johnson well with 4 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. But despite that, he had a very long, very difficult, very physical day, and dude just got bullied a lot throughout that game. And even though D-Hop seemed like he really wasn't out searching for smoke, DeAngelo kept bringing it to him over and over. Now today you see a lot of older corners kind of complimenting the young dynamic receivers before they have to go up against them. Why? Because nobody really wants to end up like this 1 or 2 years before retirement. Most cats, especially at corner, that's got to be the hardest position to play once you start to age, but most cats, they're just trying to get their last couple of bags before they walk away. They're not trying to start nothing personal with these young receivers. They're gonna make you look crazy. But DeAngelo took a different approach. He'd always been hyper aggressive. This wasn't anything new, so he did his standard thing and he tried to bully and embarrass a young D-Hop, something that the budding superstar receiver wouldn't soon forget. So remember that was week 1 of the 2014 season, so After that game, the season goes on. And you see something very interesting with the two players. D-Hop shoots up and DeAngelo shoots down because he's injured. The wily vet DeAngelo Hall ends up getting injured, and the young pup that he bullied in week 1, he ends up slowly coming into his own. By the end of that year, while an agent Andre Johnson was still a dog, don't sleep on him, but it was a young D-Hop who was now the Texans' leading receiver. Okay, fast forward through the offseason into the 2015 training camp, the Texans get hard knocks. And as fate would have it, they schedule a scrimmage against Washington. So Andre Johnson signs a deal with the Colts, so now it's D-Hop's team. He's the leading receiver, no questions. Now when you a 32-year-old cornerback in your 11th season, no reasonable person is expecting you to lock up these young guns. Not at corner, bro. Unless you literally tell that young gun to his face that that's exactly what you would do if you were guarding him. Once you do that, you're pretty much on your own. Like, may the odds be ever in your favor, bro. Good luck. Here's the quick rundown of how it played out. So DeAndre is carving up Washington's defense with his usual physical style of play. But after DeAndre sauces up this dude, despite him dropping his pass, everybody in practice knows he just dominated this rep. And if you need a little bit more evidence, notice the corner being super extra in an attempt to deflect the fact that he had nothing to do with his incompletion on this play. Corners do this often as a method of keeping their confidence high despite losing reps. A slightly annoying but very effective tactic for, keeping your psychology in the right place. This is where the subject of this video inserts himself into the situation. Maybe he's just looking to take up for his teammate here, but DeAngelo jumps in and cuts off D-Hop on his way back to the huddle, puts his hand slightly into D-Hop's chest and says, "If you do that to me, I would," whatever, but it gets cut off and DeAndre flips out as he feels that touching him after the play just crossed the line. And the last time DeAngelo touched him after the play, he did this to dude. So even if you rock with DeAngelo like I do, you can kind of understand D-Hop's reaction. A disagreement ensues, the drama intensifies. So we've already talked about the fact that DeAngelo is 32 years old in his 11th season playing the cornerback position. Disadvantage number 1. So in a lot of cases, that would actually garner some sympathy from the audience. But the fact that from what we see, DeAngelo starts his entire thing. Like he inserts himself into this, not to mention the year before, we saw how he was doing, dude. So it's like, damn, DeAngelo, you just walked into this, bro. You got to get yourself out. And I'm a fan of both of these dudes. I've talked about D-Hop before on this channel. But his ice cold delivery when he hit him with the "I fear God," like the Hard Knock producers had to be sitting there with the camera like, oh my God, I couldn't have written anything better than that. Like that's a Hollywood one-liner on an NFL practice field. Then came the climax. Later in practice, but like 5 seconds later in the show, thanks to editing, we all get the matchup we've been salivating for. D-Hop versus DeAngelo. One-on-one, mano-a-mano, winner take all. DeAngelo gets hit with a double move and he slips. He breaks all the way down. And this is about as literal as you can get when you say somebody got their ankles broken playing a sport. And like I said before, I got love for DeAngelo. That's why I'm making this video. But the undeniable fact is that he volunteered for the smoke. But when the smoke finally came, my dude couldn't stop coughing. So as a DeAndre Hopkins fan, this is one of my favorite moments ever. But as a DeAngelo Hall fan, I wish this never happened, bro. After this moment, DeAngelo took a major hit in fan perception. His legacy stock with fans and probably many of his peers took a pretty significant dip. At some point after the fact, DeAngelo took to Twitter to kind of throw some shade at D-Hop. DeAngelo spoke on how easy he felt it was to read D-Hop's routes at the time. And while DeAngelo maybe did have the veteran savvy to anticipate D-Hop's routes, in this particular situation, it was kind of like our relationship with tomorrow. We all know it's coming, and ain't a damn thing we can do to stop it. But here's the thing, in basketball it's understood, shot blockers who challenge everything at the rim, you're gonna get dunked on from time to time. Same way aggressive corners are gonna get beat. There's no way around it. DeAngelo Hall turned 32 years old the year this happened, and he obviously wasn't the same player he was in his 20s. Not to mention dude was coming off a torn ACL, which would have definitely sped up his decline as a player. His confidence and hyper-aggressive attitude made him into a star. It was a huge part in what became an exceptional and some say borderline Hall of Fame career. But eventually, and this happens to pretty much everybody if you don't adapt quick enough, his greatest strength eventually became his greatest weakness. And the same aggressive attitude that allowed his career to take off quickly at the beginning caused dude to go out in one of the most disheartening ways imaginable, at least from a fan standpoint. Despite that, I believe that what DeAngelo Hall was able to accomplish throughout his career as a whole should be celebrated. And yes, he lived and died by the metaphorical sword, but I kind of think that gets a bad rap. Every single person gets to choose their own path, and DeAngelo Hall went out on his terms, like Scarface, like Frank Sinatra. He did it his way. I respect that. He was just as brash and confident in year 11 as he was in year 1, and he never stopped bringing out the best in every receiver that he faced. Bro, cornerback gotta be one of the toughest positions to carve out a long career. There's gonna come a day where you just can't get out that back pedal the same way you used to. But unfortunately for DeAngelo, his day came during the filming of Hard Knocks and will probably be played for the next 20 or 30 years. And to be clear, this wasn't like the last time he took the field. He actually played a couple years after this. But if you look at his career, he had multiple interceptions in every single season until this one. He was done at this point. Today, DeAngelo's an analyst for NFL Network. He's addressed that fateful play multiple times, even saying his kids sometimes have to hear about it at school. But I hope that his kids also know that for the majority of his long NFL career, their dad was actually that dude during his prime. Dude was a fierce competitor to the bitter end. So while you'll most likely never be able to scrape this play from your memory, just make sure you also keep in mind that this man played Russian roulette with the game's best receivers for over a decade. And it's pretty damn amazing how long he managed to actually survive. If you enjoyed the video, please share it with another football fan, man. Click the thumbs up button, subscribe if you're brand new, enable your notifications and all that cool YouTube stuff. Other than that, my name is FlemLo Raps. I'll catch y'all boys in the next one, man.